doing right now is we're reviewing with members of the trade mission to Germany some of our thoughts and some of our takeaways from the mission itself. We've had a great discussion, great opportunity to download ideas and observations and to come up with some rough action steps. As we've said many times before, we believe strongly that New Bedford can compete well, very well, in the offshore wind industry. We believe that industry is coming to America. New Bedford has certain assets that are put it in a very advantageous position. They include our deepwater port, our hurricane dike, which will protect the harbors and continue to protect the harbor's assets. It includes infrastructure around the port, including the brand new, what will be a brand new $100 million purpose-built offshore wind facility. And we just had the groundbreaking this week for that facility. It's our seafaring workforce. As I've said many times before, our people know what they're doing when they're out at sea, and this is a marine industry, and so and one that needs folks to know how to handle things when they're out on the water. And then we're close to the wind. 25% of the nation's wind reserves lie just south of Martha's Vineyard. This is an industry that's matured over the last 20 years in Europe. It's well established. When it'll get up to speed here in the United States is not exactly certain, but what we do know is that we need to be ready for it, and that's what we're committed to do here. Nothing is guaranteed, but nothing in life is guaranteed, and we believe that it makes a lot of sense for New Bedford, and we're going to continue to push really hard because, in my view, this is an opportunity like none other that the city's had in the last half century to grow jobs, to revitalize our local economy, and to enable our folks to pursue the American dream. So that's what it's all about. The session right now is an opportunity again to share ideas that we took away from the trip. And what we're about to see is a video on the offshore wind industry. This is a video from a company called BLG that is in the business of port logistics. Did I get the name right, BL?
That's correct.
Yeah, BLG. That is in the business of port logistics. It is a company that certainly has an interest here in New Bedford and what we're doing. And what they're going to show in this video is a way that they move some of the large offshore wind components around a port facility. One of the key things that people need to know about this industry is that the finished components, the major components, are all extremely large. They are big and they are heavy, and it takes tremendous coordination to move them around safely around a port facility, safely for the people involved, but also safely for the asset itself. This video is accompanied by some pretty dramatic music. That's not our fault, so put up with it, but it's what the company uses to promote its products. But it's an interesting video, and will give people a sense of how these things work. Point out here is that these are tripod foundations. There are different types of foundations that the industry uses. So in the Cape Wind project, if I remember correctly, the Cape Wind's not using tripods. They're using more traditional monopiles. These are big steel pipes that can range in size up to 900 tons that are pile driven into the ground. And on top of that, a transition piece is stacked. On top of that, a tower and a cell, and then wind blades. In deeper waters, offshore wind developers use these tripods because more stability is needed. And so these tripods, which you'll see, which are 7, 8, 9 stories tall, are placed at the bottom of the ocean, and then pile is driven into each of the footings to stabilize them, and then the rest of the tower is built on top of that. So that just when we use the term foundation, these foundations can look different. Sometimes tripods, sometimes big steel pipes. So with that, let's take a look. And again, it's that these things are really heavy. Why does that matter to New Bedford? It matters because you can't put one of these things on a truck. You can't put one of these things on a rail. They have to be moved around by barge, by boat, and that's why it's valuable to have a marine terminal like the one that where we just broke ground this week, one that has a heavy load capacity, and that's what's unique about our terminal. It can support 4,000 pounds per square foot. Will be no other terminal like that on the East Coast. And that's why, one of the reasons why New Bedford will be competitive in this industry. As you can see, even at the port level, at port side, the items, those foundations are moved around really just in two ways, either by rail, and you saw some of the moving along rail, as well as by a device called SPMT, which is basically that big skateboard you saw that lifted the entire foundation up, and almost like in video game fashion, there was a remote control airplane fashion. There was an individual who stood right nearby and just directed the thing to the storage spot. So so that's one of the key things to keep in mind. New Bedford is in this because New Bedford will have this terminal that will enable these items to be stored and moved around and placed on barge and to go out to sea to their permanent sites. So with that, let me turn it over to Matt Morrissey, the Executive Director of the Greater New Bedford Economic Development Council, who's going to walk us through a PowerPoint that summarizes our takeaways from the trip and also includes a number of photographs, Matt, that are designed to give people a real visual sense of the kinds of things that we saw over there. Matt?
For the folks that are watching that perhaps are interested in knowing why the mayor put together this trip, we are at the forefront of an industry here in the United States. New Bedford is now emerging as the leader of any cities in the country. However, and we don't know much about the industry. However, there are about 15 years in Northern Europe of experience that we can learn from. So we put together a trip that essentially allowed a broad cross-section of individuals from various areas in our community, workforce, and economic development, and harbor development, private sector businesses, education, and government, to go to multiple cities around Northern Europe, Germany and Denmark in particular, to meet with companies, to forge relationships with other cities that have gone before us to capture their piece of a Northern European emerging offshore wind market, to sign a sister city agreement with a like city called Cuxhaven, Germany, to meet with companies that have had success in the offshore wind industry, and to demonstrate our seriousness about how we hope to attract their investment as we emerge in this space, and certainly to meet with government officials as part of that relationship building exercise, so that we have friends on the other side of the Atlantic that we can pick up the phone and call when we run into problems, as we will invariably in building this nascent market here in the United States and in New Bedford. So the cities that we visited were many, in a very robust agenda that many people worked hard to put together. But we went to Cuxhaven, Bremerhaven, Hamburg, Germany, and then up north to Aarhus, Brande, Grana, and Copenhagen. There were over 30 people in each of those sectors that I've already mentioned that participated in the trade mission, including various state officials, and perhaps most importantly, the officials who are paying for the development of our terminal here in New Bedford. And importantly, we also were joined by two journalists, one from the Standard Times, Natalie Sherman, and then second, Derek Jackson from the Boston Globe, accompanying us throughout the entire mission. There were many companies that we visited, but very importantly, the companies were not the only types of private sector entities that we did talk to. We talked to private sector training entities. We spoke to quasi-governmental organizations, not unlike the Workforce Investment Board of the Bedford Economic Development Council. And we certainly, as I mentioned, spoke to many governments. So in total, by the numbers, 33 participants, at least 40 Northern European participants, over 18 companies participated, 7 cities, 8 days, and a whole lot of wind turbines. So, very importantly, there are characteristics that we all observed. And again, for those of you that also were present, please jump in. But there were characteristics that we observed in each of the locations that we visited that we certainly think are analogous to our situation here in New Bedford. So one of them in Cuxhaven is the sense of the diversity of their economy, and part of that diversification of their economy is in tourism. Cuxhaven has done a remarkably strong job at integrating emerging heavy industry while at the same time retaining their basic cultural and touristic, to use their term, base. And that's evident throughout the community, throughout the city that we visited. Fishing also, by the way, in Cuxhaven, while it's not what it once was, and it certainly Bremerhaven maintains a substantial fishing fleet, as we'll get into, fishing is also a part of their local economic base. Here are just some shots, and I'll click through them relatively rapidly, of the trip in Cuxhaven. So we arrived, we had a brief tour of the city and an informal dinner with city leaders, and the very next day we got at it with a whole series of panel discussions with our counterparts from Cuxhaven. Here is a shot of the delegation that is mixed of northern German friends, as well as some of the trade delegation here. Introductory remarks were made by several of us representing the city of New Bedford. The mayor kicked off offering a thanks for the hospitality in opening up the doors of Cuxhaven to the city delegation, and offered a perspective on his vision for offshore wind for the city of New Bedford, for the Commonwealth, and for the country. Hans Stietzel, who was a real driver of the opportunities for us to come to Cuxhaven and to establish the relationship, frankly, over the last year, offered welcoming remarks. Alicia Barton, who is the CEO of the Mass CEC, offered some remarks. There's this guy looking up at the heavens somehow. And then we were followed by a series of in-depth discussion points led by not only individuals who are on the ground and doing important work in Cuxhaven and in Bremerhaven, but very importantly, these were the very founders of the industry that date back in the space of offshore wind 15 and 20 years. This gentleman was a former senator in the state of Bremen, and now is a consultant and also runs an industry trade association in Bremen supporting offshore wind. This individual offered us a very strong presentation on an agency that has developed over the years called the WAB. I'm not sure why B is in that acronym, but it's called the Wind Energy. The Wind Energy Agency is actually what it's called, so it's a German acronym or something. But at any rate, this organization emerged to support the lobbying efforts, the land use efforts, the business development efforts for both Cuxhaven and Bremerhaven, and was founded several years ago as the industry required certain business-driven requirements. Norbert offered an outstanding presentation again on the general area and what has happened over the period of the last decade in that area of Germany, and the presentation just continued. I realize I'm getting long in the tooth. From there, from a half a day of those presentations and data exchange, we went for a series of company visits. The first of which is a company called Ambau, and that company is one of the leaders in Germany in the manufacture of monopiles and tower pieces. Clearly, I think one of the takeaways for the trade mission delegation was that tower manufacturing and monopile manufacturing is an early stage opportunity for job creation for New Bedford. We had frankly, the treat of seeing the component parts of the foundation, the tower, and the transition pieces, which are identical to those which will be used right here in New Bedford for the Cape Wind project. This is the piece of the let's see if this works. No. This is the piece called this is the piece of the foundation and tower called the transition piece. This is 65 feet tall, and we will be receiving transition pieces right here in our city in about 16 months. As the mayor mentioned, in addition to the monopile construction, there were also tripods. This is a different kind of tripod than the ones we just saw in the video. These were manufactured by a company called Bard, right in Cuxhaven. The depth, these are used for much more extreme depths of water. Here's a shot of some workers up at the top of a transition piece. We will see a very similar type of photograph being taken less than 2 years from now here in New Bedford. To give you a sense of scale, here are some members of the delegation standing in front of these pieces. So we went to several companies, and then in Cuxhaven, the evening involved the official signing of the Sister City Agreement, historic both for Cuxhaven and for New Bedford, in that there are very few Sister City Agreements that either city has formed in the past, and this was treated with a very real level of formality and seriousness. This is a historic building, a revered historic building in the city of Cuxhaven where the ceremony took place. And here's a shot of the mayor offering the Lord Mayor of Cuxhaven a symbol of our gratitude for not only hospitality of the visit, but for the ongoing relationship that we had over the next year or so. And I don't know, Mayor, if you want to mention some of your comments to the Lord Mayor that evening or not.
Yeah, so one of the things to point out about the Sister City arrangement is that it's not, it isn't an empty ceremonial exercise. It's not just for, the purpose of, just general claims to goodwill. It's really about establishing, in this case, a relationship with a port that has developed an industry that we would also like to have grow here. And as Matt noted, it is very useful to our efforts to be able to pick up the phone and call someone in Germany, call the mayor, call business leaders there, and ask them to help us work through some of the issues that we might confront here. And to do that readily, we need to establish those relationships up front. So that is that's the general idea, and I think we succeeded in that way. I think we have established a very good working relationship with all these individuals, and having the ceremony as a capstone to those efforts really cemented that important relationship.
After a day and a half in Cuxhaven, Germany, we went off to the city of Bremerhaven, population of 114,000, with a similar history of really 12 to 15 years of direct activity in the offshore wind space. Again, a broad takeaway was the remarkable integration in Bremerhaven of this new industry into the life of the city. It was widely reported that this hotel that's just seen through the yard arms of a tall ship and convention center, without the offshore wind industry's emergence over the last decade in Bremerhaven, would never have been built. Not that they didn't have struggles in getting that hotel built. We had some wonderful conversations about the challenges of getting a new hotel built, but nevertheless, it was very clear to the leaders that we spoke to about how that deal went together and the importance of the offshore wind industry to it occurring. And certainly they felt that this modern hotel that looks like it could have come out of someplace in the Middle East, Dubai, was a symbol, a prideful symbol of the city's resurgence after very many years of economic decline. And the city's unemployment rate in Bremerhaven just 10 years ago was 24%. Today it's around 10 or 11%. And again, not where they want it to be. They'd like it to be zero, but they do attribute to the offshore wind industry a significant amount of that sway in the unemployment space. But just take a look at the slide where you see this kind of very pedestrian-friendly activity that exists alongside existing vessels who are engaged in other parts of the industry, We visited a cultural institution that represented the out-migration of Germans, the largest single out-migration point in Germany to the United States. It's the kind of inverse of Ellis Island, in fact, remarkable cultural institution. Again, with the resources that were provided and the optimism provided by the new industry, folks had indicated that it probably would not have happened, the development. We were welcomed by officials, both officials from the city of Bremerhaven as well as business leaders in the city of Bremerhaven at the Immigration Center for a lunch where the mayor spoke and also Councilor Duarte spoke to hear the head of their city council and offered an exchange of gifts, as they did in return. There's Councilor Duarte, our council president, with Mayor Mitchell and their city council president. Following that exchange, a series of presentations again were made with leaders from the city of Bremerhaven, offering an overview of their experiences from day one in developing the industry, some of the challenges, how they're organized, and how they are projecting into the future. Now here's an image of those folks. Joe Nauman, who is the vice chair of the NBEDC, offered remarks really from the perspective of what traditional business and manufacturing and why it's important for traditional business and manufacturing to participate in the trade mission and what they're thinking about as it relates to the new industry. He offered remarks in that regard. And then, of course, the delegation locally offered presentations to orient the audience to who we are, what we're doing, what we're thinking about as it relates to offshore wind. And then again, this individual represents BIS, which is the Economic Development Agency, similar to the NBEDC, and there were several others. Very detailed presentations that I think all of us came away with a very real sense of their struggles and their opportunities. And those will all be detailed in a forthcoming report. From there, like in Cuxhaven, we visited several companies that are engaged in the manufacturing of component parts that have come online as the port emerged as a very important deployment port from an infrastructure standpoint. Clusters began, like in Cuxhaven, to develop around their port, and Repower, a large turbine manufacturer, was the first that we visited. And here is, I think that's City Council President Oliveira standing underneath one of Repower's turbines. To give you a sense of scale. In each one of these visits, presentations begin offering overviews and then a plant tour of the particular facility. These are various component parts. Arriva Wind, a competitor to Repower, opened up their doors. They are a very interesting company with very high-minded aspirations, and likewise similar presentations were made, and then we went for a site tour. Very helpful, by the way, was walking these sites, recognizing what kind of requirements these businesses have, because undoubtedly these businesses will be the businesses we will be talking to, creating a broad marketing brush and business development brush to attract them to New Bedford. Very, very helpful. And here's a picture of the enormous group that these companies very graciously allowed into their manufacturing spaces. It's really remarkable that everyone emerged unhurt. Wesser Wind is the company that produces these enormous tripods, these 900-ton tripods that we just saw in that promotional video of BLG's. One of the many takeaways from this part of the experience was just the almost singular opportunity for welding opportunities and jobs to take place. There's welding throughout the supply chain, as someone mentioned earlier. Here's a picture of our deputy port director standing in one of the legs of the tripod. It is important to note that while these are very large, the scale of these pieces is really not that dissimilar from the scale of the single monopiles that Cape Wind will be bringing through our port, and future projects will be bringing through the Port of New Bedford. We also visited with Eurogate, a large, primarily shipping and container concern, one of the largest actually in Europe, who has isolated several of their key parcels that had been dedicated to cargo to the purpose of offshore wind deployment. They're, again, primarily a shipper, but they're very eager to understand what the U.S. market may hold for them, as was the case with several companies that we visited. Here's a shot from the company's rooftop dining facility, where you can just see the areas here where all these gantry cranes are obviously dedicated to the shipment of cargo, but here's the area that they've dedicated for the storage and then deployment of tower sections for offshore wind. This is another form of deep water support system. It's called a jacket foundation. We'll be seeing these in our port in the third and fourth projects as in the Massachusetts wind energy area, the deeper waters will require these kinds of foundations. Again, a significant takeaway is just the significant amount of labor that it takes to build such a jacket foundation. As we were driving through the BLG's terminal, called the ABC terminal, which hosts those large tripod foundation pieces, we noticed that there were several people working, now that they were already erected, working on one of the ladder pieces, and we were able to stop and get a shot. But to give you a sense of scale, it's quite extraordinary. Just another shot of the multifaceted nature of Bremerhaven's port, where you have a cargo vessel on the left, you have gantry cranes on the right, you have automobiles in the foreground, and in the midground we have Vestas tower pieces. It's important to note that Bremerhaven is one of the world's largest shipping ports. It rivals Hamburg. However, there is not. We didn't go to compare ourselves apples to apples with Bremerhaven. We don't want to be Bremerhaven. We couldn't be Bremerhaven. But that's not the point. We were looking for in this trade mission opportunities where there is synergy, opportunities to understand how much actual land is being leveraged after 12 or 15 years of the development of this offshore wind industry. And we certainly came away with a very rich sense of that in the city of Bremerhaven. This is a shot of a welcome dinner at Eurogate's headquarters, and the mayor offering remarks. And then the next day, we were not able to take photographs of Siemens, though it was one of the most exciting of the many exciting visits. But at Siemens, there was, we went to the Siemens Brande plant, where there are over 4,000 employees making primarily nacelles, but other component parts as well. And we were treated to a full complement of understanding what happens at that facility, what Siemens' vision is of the U.S. market, and how Siemens, over time, through various conversations through the two groups that went on 2 separate tours of the facility, how Siemens is going to integrate themselves into the United States market. The next day, we were at the Siemens deployment site of Grana, which is a site very similar in scale and in size to what our New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal will be. And it presented us with an opportunity to see a terminal site that is currently in use, where you have, it was on the back end of the deployment of the Anhalt wind farm, and there were nacelles. And these are nacelles right here for the very same turbine that Cape Wind will be using in 20 short months here in New Bedford. And here's we're going back and forth a little bit. Here's another shot of one of the blades. This is a 3.6 meter blade, very similar to, actually identical to the Cape Wind blade, where you have people standing in that blade, which is remarkable in size. And here we go. So once we walked the facility in Grana, understanding what that laid out area is, how it actually operates. We have the designers of the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal and Apex Engineering, who are long friends to New Bedford, and now the consultants working as engineers to the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, testing their theories against the practical realities of how that terminal had been designed. And then we went offshore. Very, very few people in the industry itself have ever actually gone to an offshore wind farm, never mind an offshore wind farm that's in production, meaning it is in the process of being developed. So this was a very significant moment for New Bedford and for our whole delegation, and I think we took solid advantage of it. And we're jumping back and forth a little bit here. Here are some nacelles, hubs. These are the nacelles here. Here are the hubs and the router assembly. Here are some first stage tower sections with Bill White, who's the offshore wind director for the Mass CEC, standing in the foreground. Just enormous. We are going to be seeing these very pieces standing on the very edge of our terminal here in New Bedford. And then some 750-ton crawler cranes moving across the terminal, not unlike what we'll see here, with a nacelle ready to be loaded onto a jack-up barge. As you get out onto the water, here's the jack-up barge. Barge, jacks, elevated so that there's obviously stability. It's elevated right onto the seafloor, and you have what were these enormous pieces, 65 feet, making any of us look tiny by comparison. Now they look tiny in the grand expanse of the ocean. And this was just absolutely stunning to see this. You can see all the people in the jack-up barge when we were there in person. But this is the final turbine now fully erected here as part of the assembly. Just a close-up of the blade cassette. These blades are being assembled onto that tower. And there's just one shot of this is what would have been the western edge of the wind farm. And again, the wind farm itself is about the same size that Cape Wind will be in Nantucket Sound. And remarkably, when you're there, you have a sense of the space that even exists between these enormous structures. You clearly get a sense that there's a lot of activity that can take place within the wind farm, and that will be the case both for Cape Wind, and it's anticipated to be the case in the Massachusetts wind energy area and the Rhode Island wind energy area.
Yeah, we had a group from a broad array of backgrounds, and I just want to quickly go around the room to note who was there, just so that our viewers get a sense of who was there. We have about not even half the group here, but in addition to Matt and me, there was Bob Haynes, the former president of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, Len Coriarty, who is the executive director of the Greater New Bedford Workforce Investment Board, Lauren Costello from the Economic Development Council, Neil Mello, who's my chief of staff, Jeff Steeb, who's the port director for the Port of New Bedford, our embedded reporter, Natalie Sherman from the Standard Times, who doesn't care to be announced, but that's okay, Natalie. You're part of the team. Ward McIntyre from Fathom Research, Fernando Garcia, who's the chairman of the board of Bristol Community College, Bob Gardner from Bayliner on the New Bedford waterfront, which is in the boat storage business, Jake Borklin, an engineer with Apex Engineering, and Terry Romanowicz, who is in charge of workforce investment, workforce training programs at Bristol Community College. A broad array of folks. We have about 10 of them here today. We had 32 total, and we benefited from having such a large group there of folks that have a connection to this community in one way or the other, and who will, in one way or another, play a role in the offshore wind industry here, whether it's in training folks for jobs in the industry itself or related industries, helping with business development, folks who are part of corporations now that might find opportunities in the industry, as well as many others. So we benefited from having a group of many perspectives, generating ideas about how best New Bedford can compete. We will be in a competition. There will be other places around the country that will be looking to establish themselves in this industry. And as I've said before, our goal is to compete very aggressively, and that's what we intend to do. And so with that, let me just see if there's anybody in particular. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. We won't employ the Socratic method here and pick people out for comment, but if there's anybody who wants to weigh in for the benefit of our viewing audience, go right ahead. Anybody? Go ahead, Terry.
So I think just from Bristol Community College's standpoint, I think it was just really reinforcing for us that we are on the right path in the stuff that we're already undertaking in terms of trying to build apprenticeship training programs to work with the Workforce Investment Board to make sure that we're on target with what employers are going to come. But I think it was just exciting to know that there's so many job opportunities that are going to be coming to the city of New Bedford as a result of this, and that we as an educational institution are really excited about that and want to be a part of making jobs available. So I think anybody who's watching should keep their eye out on what the jobs are and where things are really going, because this is really going to shake up this city, and I'm thrilled to be a part of that.
Great, thank you, Terry. Anybody else wants to weigh in? Go ahead, Fernando. I would have been shocked if you remained silent.
You know, whenever you have the opportunity to participate in a project that's history in the making, it's always exciting. This project is revolutionary, and I define it as the fourth renaissance of this great city of ours. We had our whaling days, our manufacturing days, our textile days. Sadly, you know, the fishing industry globally is diminishing. But this has a great opportunity, not only for New Bedford, but for the entire South Coast. It's a total regional thing. It's a situation where, you know, we're not only doing a benefit to the region, to the state, but also nationally. We're becoming players in the international playground of super development, of clean energy, you know, to get away from dependency of things. Here in our particular city, it will provide great jobs, as it will throughout the region. It will also elevate the quality of life. This brings a lot of value to life. You know, what do we contribute to society? Through this, existing businesses will grow. New businesses will flourish. It will attract the, businesses that we're trying to gather through economic development to increase our tax base, to improve our infrastructure, our educational system, and all of those things. True, you know, there's some naysayers that will say we do have some concerns, with the waters, the harbor, and all that. But we can't be crippled by things that have been done in the past. We must move forward, and luckily we were at the right place at the right time, because we are ideally situated for the win. And to end on a humorous note, as Peter, Paul, and Mary would say, for those of you that remember them, the answer, my friends, is blowing in the wind.
Jay Brooklyn, I'm not sure you can top that. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
I don't think I can, although I do remember Peter, Paul, and Mary. I just wanted to say that as an engineer on the trip, it was extremely gratifying in one sense to see that what we have been planning for and developing here for a number of years in the Port of New Bedford, a corollary of what we are going to do here has been completed and is underway in multiple other places in the world. We were very heartened to see that our hard work here was validated. All of the mistakes that had been made by the European ports in their development, we were able to learn from, and as we applied our engineering knowledge to the development of the port and the implementation of the wind industry here for New Bedford, it was validated that we had worried about the right things and that we had learned the right things from our partners in the European design area. Now, one thing that was very pointed to us, as engineers, we understand that complicated construction activities such as the building of an offshore wind farm can be very overwhelming to to an average person. What we do understand and what we know as engineers is that when you break things down to their component parts, they're no longer overwhelming. And one of the things that we saw directly in our travels in Europe was that each of the component parts that we were able to see, there was a direct correlation with a business type or an activity that is currently going on right now in New Bedford. And so we saw firsthand that there is direct application of the kinds of activities that are common in the Port of New Bedford to this new industry.
Right, thank you, Jay. Anybody else? Bob Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to join with all these nice folks to advance a extraordinarily important chapter in the history of New Bedford. It strikes me that for all the issues we have with our government, here is an opportunity for our government, whether at the state level, the city level, public universities and community colleges, economic development, workforce development, to join together in an enterprise with the business community to supply jobs for people who live and work in our community. It's stunning that the opportunity that exists here going forward in the next couple of years could place New Bedford in the same place it's been to in many, many different endeavors that Fernando talked about. When you think about the potential for this project, when we get this right and put 100 wind turbines out in Nantucket Sound, that the entire east coast of the United States, or the northeast coast of the United States, will be populated, just like in Germany and just like in Denmark, with clean, renewable energy. And a $100 million marine terminal that was funded by the citizens of this Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with taxes that were paid for by the very people who live right here in this community, is going to provide the jobs and the education and the training and the opportunity for people to achieve the American dream. This is a win-win-win-win situation for this community, for the Commonwealth, and for the United States of America. I applaud you for your leadership. I applaud the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I applaud everybody who has taken place in this bold endeavor to achieve greatness for the city once again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? All right, that is a really good note to conclude on. We'll just say this. If you can't help but have high hopes in listening to those comments, and they're well placed. None of this stuff is pie in the sky. There is a reason why we all believe that all the things that you heard can materialize here in New Bedford, and that's because of the advantages that New Bedford has in this industry that we've talked about, the port, the proximity to the wind, and so forth. And again, none of this stuff is guaranteed. But again, nothing is guaranteed in life. We don't, tell the, don't expect an NFL team to say, you know what, we don't have a great shot at winning the Super Bowl this year, so we're not going to bother playing. We believe that we've got a shot. We're going to play hard. We're going to be aggressive, and we're going to do things that, frankly, this city or other cities of our size would have done or would be inclined to do. So this trip itself is something, again, that cities of our size, even cities of much larger size, would even venture to undertake. And appreciate most of all Matt Morrissey's leadership in putting it together and developing the relationships that were necessary to make it happen, and with Lauren Costello's help, logistically pulling it off, because it was a very tough trick. And we are out there promoting New Bedford and this industry and telling New Bedford's story in a very big way. I was in Washington this week having a series of very high-level conversations with members of the Obama administration about what we're trying to pull off here, with the Secretary of Transportation, with a number of other folks, including folks in the White House. People need to know New Bedford's story. It's a compelling one. What we're trying to do aligns very well with the priorities of the Patrick administration and the Obama administration, and so we see an opportunity here. We're going to continue to drive it home. So for our viewers, why don't we go ahead and play this video, which will depict visually how a wind farm is staged, how it's been staged in Germany, how it's likely to be staged here in New Bedford.
The Enholt offshore wind farm is being developed by Dong Energy together with 2 Danish pension funds, Pension Denmark and PKA. Comprising a total of 111 turbines, each capable of generating 3.6 megawatts of power, Enholt is set to become Denmark's largest offshore wind farm, providing 4% of the total Danish power consumption. Located 20 kilometers off the Danish northeast coast, in the Kattegat Sea area, southwest of the island of Anholt, the wind farm will have a capacity of 400 megawatts and will ultimately supply power to more than 400,000 homes. From an operational base on the Danish coast at Grenaa, preparations for the wind farm commenced in the spring of 2009, and to meet the contract conditions, first power must be exported to Denmark's national grid by the end of 2012. Onshore at Grenaa, the worksite has been prepared to support the installation phase. The quay has already been developed to ensure the efficient handling of the turbines, and the construction of the wind farm will be coordinated from a new project office in the old customs building. In addition, 2 old cold stores will be refurbished and turned into a new operational and maintenance facility. Once these works are complete, the harbour at Grenaa will be used as the supply base for the offshore site. The turbine towers will arrive from several locations across Denmark and will be sailed to the harbour of Grenaa. The turbine blades will be transported from Aalborg, the nacelles from Brande. Meanwhile, the cables will be made in Hanover and transported to either Fredericia or Grenaa, where they will be loaded onto the cable installation vessel. Finally, the monopiles and transition pieces will be built in Aalborg and shipped directly to the site. And with so many contracts covering all aspects of this project, the Dong Energy project team will not only be coordinating a highly complex operation, it will be setting a new benchmark for Danish offshore wind farm development. As preparations for the turbine installation commence, the monopiles are made ready for sail-out at the Bled workshops in Aalborg. Some 5.35 meters in diameter and up to 47 meters in length, the monopiles are first capped onshore in preparation for being towed out to the site by tugs. Weighing up to 460 tons, the monopiles will be transported offshore and installed by MT Højgaard. Towing the foundations out to the wind farm site will take some 10 to 12 hours. Upon arrival, the barge will rendezvous with the installation vessel, the Svenden, and preparations will be made for the lift. Thorough surveys have previously revealed the subsea geology and helped to establish the exact location for each turbine. Carefully positioned over the precise location, the Svenden commences the monopile installation sequence. The main hoist on board the Svenden is first connected to the trunnions on the monopile. The bottom cap is then removed and the monopile rotates to vertical as it fills with water. The top cap is then removed and the pile is lowered to the seabed. Finally, pile hammering will only commence once the area has been made safe, free from encroaching sea mammals. With the foundations in place, the transition pieces can also be shipped offshore by MT Højgaard from the Bled workshops. Each transition piece weighs 180 tons, and a total of 9 will be shipped out at one time on board Jumbo Shipping's dynamically positioned vessel. Once on site, the transition piece is lifted from the deck of the dynamically positioned vessel and lowered into place on the monopile. While the transition piece is held secure, grouting is completed between it and the monopile, and then a protective cover is put in place prior to the installation of the wind turbine itself. However, before installation commences, all the cabling inside the wind farm will be completed by the cable-laying vessels Steinat 82 and Pontra Maris. The components for the wind turbines themselves are transported from the Siemens factory to the harbour at Grano by ship and by lorry. Here, the lower and middle sections of the tower are connected and stored alongside the other components, the top section of the tower, the nacelle, and the 3 blades, until they are loaded onto one of the 3 turbine installation vessels, which include the sea installer. On this project, the sea installer carries components for 4 complete turbines, and once on site, the vessel jacks up clear of the water, and an access gangway is installed between the vessel and the transition piece. Installation begins with the combined lower and middle tower sections being lowered onto the transition piece and mounted first. The top section is then lifted into place. While a third lift then places the nacelle on top of the tower. Finally, each blade is lifted and bolted into place. With a total diameter of 120 meters, or as long as a football field, the massive blades ensure the efficient harnessing of the wind. The turbine installation sequence has been planned to ensure that approximately 30 turbines will be operational by the end of 2012, when clean, sustainable electricity generated by these turbines will begin to flow direct to the Danish national grid, via Grano and the substation at Tige, just north of Aarhus. The full wind farm must be operational by the end of 2013, by which time all that will remain at Grano is a clean site, while far out at sea, Denmark's newest and largest ever offshore wind farm will stand as testament to the strategic vision and engineering skill of Dong Energy and its partners.